In my last video, I showed you how to retrieve some inflation data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and I think that's a really good source of data. But what if I told you there's an even better place to go grab all sorts of data? And that is what I have on the screen right here, which is FRED. And FRED stands for the Federal Reserve Economic Data. And this is put together by the St. Louis branch of the Federal Reserve, and it pulls data together from all over the place. Now let me show you what some of this data can look like, and I'm just going to warn you that it can very quickly become overwhelming. So I'm here looking at different categories, and they have things like money, banking and finance, population and employment, national accounts, production and business activity, prices. This is what I look at a lot. They have all sorts of different things here. International data, regional data, and some academic or historical stuff. So this is really fantastic, a fantastic source of getting kind of everything. It has stuff from, for example, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the Bureau of Economic Analysis, the census, and even more sources. So let's go ahead and grab right here at FRED. I'm going to go ahead and grab a particular data set, and I have been interested in housing starts recently. In case you've been living under a rock, it's expensive to buy a home. And I have been curious about what it looks like is more being built, a kind of a supply or demand type of thing. So very quickly, I just typed in housing starts, which is how many houses are being built in the United States. And you can see this data goes back to, January of 1959. That's a long time. And this is a monthly data series up through July of 2024. Now, a couple of things just to get familiar with how data from FRED looks. I could download it, I can edit the graph, which I'll show you in a minute, but sometimes it's really helpful to understand notes about what the data says. So sometimes there's certainly a citation, where did this come from? Helpful to know that this came from the U.S. Census Bureau and HUD. How frequently this was published, in this instance monthly, and units is also very helpful. Sometimes I do like to shrink the time horizon, which they have a pretty easy slider to do right here. Okay, I'm more familiar with, 2000 until current. And the other cool thing you can do is change a bunch of stuff. For example, thousands of units, maybe I wanted the change or percent change. That's a common one to do. Percent change from a year ago. CAGR or compound annual rate of change, growth rate. All sorts of different ways to do things. I do like this index one. They have a function that I don't personally use quite a bit, but you can add data to a formula. So if I wanted to do total housing starts minus housing completions, so I can see if the number of starts are going up faster than the completions, I could do a formula here. Like I said, I don't personally find that very useful, but here's something I do find useful, which is adding a line. So in this one, all you have to do is start searching, and I'm looking for the Fed funds rate. And I know that down here, the Fed funds effective rate, this is the interest rate that everybody thinks about that's out in the market. And you might see this and say, hey, that's a little bit tough to read. It's this tiny little orange line that's pretty much covered up. And the reason for that is both the Fed's funds rate, which is a percent, and this new housing starts, which is in thousands of units, it's on the same axis. The quick way to change that is go to Format up here, and I can see it's a line graph, no stacking, no nothing like that, but line 1 is on the left or the y-axis, left y-axis, and then I want to put the Fed funds effective rate on the right axis. Now I can start to see, oh yeah, I got two data sets here. And as a side note, I'm going to zoom in just a little bit more. I was interested in this because I tend to do a lot of work with building supplies companies. And I was just curious, what's it going to look like, going forward for their business prospects. And we can see here the peak, maybe I'll make this a little bit bigger. The peak of housing was roughly in, let's call that 2006, January 2006, and it fell down for a while. And we are still not back at this high, run rate of when housing starts were really high. And what this means in this area right here is our housing starts have fallen behind our population growth, which means it's going to take a long time to build a lot more housing in this country to make it much more manageable for people in high cost of living areas to buy a house. So that's just a little side note, side data point for you. The other thing I'm interested in is elsewhere I had run a correlation analysis between the new housing starts and the Fed funds effective rate, because in other areas I've shown that it is almost certain that the Fed is going to cut interest rates on its September 18th, 2024 meeting. And I was curious, how long does it take for that to actually flow through to the market? And as it turns out, there's a lag of somewhere between 3 and 6 months when it comes to the Fed cutting this number in red, the Fed funds effective rate, versus when it comes through to, for example, housing starts. So this is pretty slick. I like this a lot. You can share it on social media, but more commonly I'll download it into Excel and maybe go do something else with it. Now, I do not think that Excel is going anywhere anytime soon, so I just wanted to show you that there's a handy dandy add-in for Microsoft Excel for all this FRED data. And if you've never added an add-in to Microsoft Excel, I'll show you how to do that. There's some instructions down here which I find to be pretty good. The install instructions are clear. So I'm going to tab over to Excel, and on the Home ribbon, if I go to Add-ins and then I look for FRED, as I add that, sure enough, it pops up over here. Got it. This is pretty easy to use, I find. So if I'm just trying to find stuff, I go to a quick start just to tell me how this whole thing works. And they give me I guess a syntax for if I wanted to start typing things in. You need 4 rows worth of data. What's the series ID? What's the manipulation, which could just be the raw data. In this instance, it looks like they have a change. The frequency, Q equals quarter, M is monthly, so forth and so on, and a start date. A couple other things that are helpful here just to show how this works. But if I wanted to start something, I could click search. Let's search the Fed. Sure enough, brings me back to where I was on this piece. We'll close that one. Okay, so let's go grab something. There's US data, international data. This is just a bunch of the releases. For US, I find this to be a pretty clean interface. So prices, I'm always talking about prices. I like the producer price index because I happen to work on it. I think it's pretty cool. And this is the series ID, in case I didn't know that off the top of my head. And if I click this one, get data, it makes a pretty good guess on what I would want. So it says, just give me the data for this series in a monthly format, and this is the date range that I have. It also is nice enough to pull in some, I guess, attribution data. Where did I get this from? What's the source? If I wanted to continue to add things, I could do that in additional columns. So let's pull something else. We'll pull in PCE. Why not? As I get that here, I can see that it started the second set of columns for the PCI chained index. Now, I do have a problem with this. Make this a little bit bigger, easier to read. The problem is this starts in 2009 and this starts in 1959. So if I wanted to change that, I would just go, maybe I'll make it January 1st, 1/1/2010, which is an arbitrary date, 1/1/2010. Go get it. And sure enough, there's my data. Start to finish, it should match up. I think these are published on the same scale. So there you go. Now you have your monthly data from 2 different price indices in the same, well, granularity, like I said, month, but also at the same start date, which is pretty helpful. There are so many different things you can do here. I talked about this when I was showing the Fed website, the FRED website, and you can have various levels of data manipulation. This LIN is the levels 1, no transformations. I guess it's as close to raw as you can get. You can include all these other ones, but for what I'm typically doing, I like to get the raw data and then go manipulate it elsewhere. The frequency aggregation, these are the shortcuts you would need to know. Monthly is M, and you can see the other ones that they have here. Okay, so the last thing I'll mention that is if you're tired of Excel and you wanted to get your data in some other way, the Fred does have an API. It's been out there since about 2009. The documentation is pretty robust. You can see it all here. And the API key is very easy to request. When I requested it, I had it in less than 24 hours. So when it's all said and done, Fred is a great source for finding data, and I don't think a lot of people appreciate that it's out there. I just had a conversation with a colleague who's very savvy, and he didn't even know that there was the Fred plugin for Excel. So that changed how he can get data and who he can help. So that's pretty much it. I hope this is helpful for you. If you do find it helpful, let me know and I can continue making videos like this. But if it seems silly or trivial to you, let me know that too so I can go find something else to work on. Thanks for your time, and I hope to see you soon. Goodbye.